Hi, I'm Charlie Thomas, the TriQuetra CNC. Today we're going to go over auto measuring your touch plate with the OneFinity controller. That's me in the background there, and there's my lovely wife Linda. So, now that we know each other, let's get started. When you open up your toolbox, if you haven't put measurements in, this is what you're going to see. It's a red message here telling you need to put your measurements in, so we'll just go right to that screen right here. This screen is where you'll actually enter your measurements, whether you use the machine to measure them or if you do it with a set of calipers for each, and that's for each axis. I highly recommend that you enter them in millimeters, even if you're an inch user like me. Your OneFinity controller is configured to run in millimeters, and the touch plate needs to be put in millimeters, so you might as well just start out with millimeters here. That doesn't mean you're locked into using millimeters for everything on your machine, just for the touch plate. So anyway, if you want to use your machine to actually put the measurements in, you'll click this button. But first let me show you something real quick that people seem to miss. If you click inside here, for each box you'll see this picture show up, and this shows you where to measure from. Okay, anyway, let's go to using the machine to do it so we get some good accurate measurements. Just make sure you read everything on this page here. These little blue boxes give you a little bit tidbits of information. Notice that this is the front of the machine. This is how you'll have your touch plate mounted down to your wasteboard. If you're going to do a zeroing sequence that measures the z-axis as well as the x and y, you'll need to make sure you have something conductive underneath the touch plate. But I'll go over that in the video as we actually do this. Anyway, just read these boxes here. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, and then in the final step it's telling you to check which one of these you want to do. I'll check X, Y, and Z, so we'll do them all. And then you'll just generate the code right here. And that code already exists because I've already created it. But if I hadn't created it, then it would create it and it would be in this folder right here. If you just start over and look at it again, just hit start over right there and you can go back to it. Once you have your measurements, once you've run this code, then you will make sure that you come back to this page, and from the home page, it's this button right here in the middle, and that's where you'll put your measurements in. So enough of the toolbox, let's go to the shop and run this code and let you see what's going to happen. Here I'm going to walk you through getting your touch plate mounted on your CNC machine so that you can use the machine to measure the touch plate itself. In this image you can see that underneath the touch plate I have a piece of aluminum. This is so that I can measure the z-axis. If you want to measure your z-axis using the machine, you'll need something conductive underneath it. If you're not going to measure the z-axis, then you can just put this straight down on top of your wasteboard and everything will be just fine. Also, you'll notice that I have a round bit coming out of my collet. That's actually just a standard 2-flute end mill, and I just put it in upside down so that it's round where it's going to be using to probe the touch plate. That way I don't get any bad readings because it touched off inside a cutting flute or something like that. Always be sure that you connect your banana plug to the touch plate, and as you can see here I've got my magnetic ground connected. Here the red arrows are pointing towards the front of your machine. Make sure that the little half circle cutout on the bottom side of the touch plate, which is facing up in this picture, is towards the back of your machine and to the left. And in here I've got the conductive plate that's underneath the touch plate. It needs to make sure you have at least 1 inch of space in front of the touch plate. The bit's going to be moving towards that circle and those arrows where it says 1 inch. That's where it's going to touch off on the bottom to get the height of the touch plate. So you need to make sure you have at least 1 inch sticking out there for it to touch off on. Also, you want to note that I have quite a bit of bits sticking out from my collet. If you're using this for a OneFinity Touch Plate, you'll need a minimum of 3/4 of an inch sticking out of your collet. If you have a Triquetra Touch Plate that you're using with the OneFinity, then that's fine, you can still do this, but you'll need to make sure that you have a good solid inch of stick out on your bit. Your bit should be positioned over the touch plate so that it's above the target circle. Now the target circle is on the face of the touch plate, which is on the bottom in this case, but the target circle is directly below where the bit is right now in this image. So just make sure you're on that corner or pretty close to the corner. You can be about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch inside the touch plate. It's pretty forgiving. But anyway, the target circle is on the bottom side from where you would see it right here. Okay, now that you know how to set up your touch plate and position your bit, let's go ahead and run this code and we'll see what happens. Okay, we're back in the shop here. I've got the touch plate mounted. Now it's time to load the file. And right there it's the XYZ measurements. We run the file. Now it's just looking for the top. And now it's going to measure the Z-axis height. It's going to touch twice. Okay, now you're going to want to write down the measurements that are showing up in the display at 15.363 and disregard the negative symbol when you write that down. We're going to put that in the toolbox later. So you just press the continue button, and now it's raised up and it's going to measure, or it's going to reference off the front edge of the y-axis, and now it's going to jog over and measure that distance from the front side to the shoulder there. There we go. Now the pop-up box is telling you to write that down, so you're going to write down the numbers that are right there in the y-axis, which is 54.101, and then continue. Now it's going to find a reference point or a starting point for the x-axis, and then it will raise up and do the same thing for the x that it did for the y. Notice how it slows down before it gets too close. Okay, it found that edge. Now the box is telling you to write that one down. Let me scroll up here and get so you can see it. There it is. Now the x-axis is 54.101. You need to write that down. And then you can hit continue. And the bit's just going to raise up about 2 inches so that you can remove everything without hitting the bits. So now that you have all the measurements, we'll jump back into the toolbox. Okay, we're back at the computer at the Triquetra Toolbox Companion for OneFinity, and we're going to click on this touch plate measurements button again like we did before. And now that we have the measurements that we wrote down from using the machine to do the measuring, all we do now is just simply enter those measurements here. So the x-axis was 54.101 millimeters, and The y-axis was also 54.101, and that trailing 0 doesn't matter if it's on there or not. The z-axis we had 15.303. So now that we have our measurements in, we just click on Save Entries, and it says they're updated. And now we also need to put these in the OneFinity controller, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But once we have them in here and saved, we go back to our home page, and if we choose to zero to the right corner, let's just say, and we choose millimeters because that's what our touch plate is measured in, we confirm the bit diameter, and right here our measurements are just like we just now put them in. So you only have to enter them once. Now you can change these if you need to. So if something happens and you get a different touch plate, or for whatever reason you don't like those measurements, you can change them. You can do it in any one of these screens that has these boxes. So anyway, that's how you measure your touch plate with the OneFinity CNC machine.